Today's true story is both tragic and disturbing because the woman in today's story didn't just ruin her own life, she absolutely destroyed her best friend's life as well. So stick around until the end to find out why. And make sure to hit that like and subscribe button and turn on all of your notifications so you don't miss any of our uploads. And if you find the secret in today's background and you are the first person to post the timestamp in the comments below, then we will pin you to the top of the comments. And of course, if you're curious about any of the things I've used in today's video, you can find a link to them in the description box below. Okay, let's begin. Sydney, Australia was a long way from Indonesia, which was perhaps why Mirna Salihin and Jessica Wangsko became such close friends. They both had started their first year at the prestigious Billy Blue College of Design, and they had both come from Jakarta, Indonesia, specifically to attend this school. Both girls came from wealthy Indonesian families and both had a passion for graphic design, and so they were eager to get their careers started. After graduation from college, Mirna went back to Jakarta to work so she could be with her family. Meanwhile, Jessica stayed in Sydney to work. Jessica and Mirna remained good friends over the years, talking often over the phone or by text. They had both found excellent jobs, and they had both fallen in love with young men. Mirna was dating a young Indonesian man, and Jessica was with a young Australian man. In 2014, Mirna took a vacation back to Sydney, and the two girls met to catch up. It had been so long since they had seen each other that they were both super excited for the visit. And so, during their time together, Mirna and Jessica giggled and chatted about their lives, their work, and their boyfriends. And it was during their conversation about their boyfriends that Mirna was shocked and a little bit concerned to learn that Jessica's boyfriend, Patrick O'Connor, was a bit of a bad boy. When the girls were friends in college, they were pretty conservative. They concentrated on their studies and nothing else. But now Jessica was dating a guy with a completely different way of life. Patrick enjoyed drugs and alcohol, and his bad habits seemed to be rubbing off on Jessica. Despite their solid friendship for so many years, the two girls argued about Jessica's boyfriend. Mirna had made it clear that she did not approve of her dating a man who was such a bad influence on her, and told her in no uncertain terms that she should get away from him. Mirna told her that this guy was bad news, and if she didn't change her path, it would change her life forever. Jessica didn't like hearing this and was pretty upset with Mirna's reaction to the relationship, telling Mirna that she loved Patrick despite his faults and that she was going to stick with him. And this whole time she was becoming more and more furious with Mirna, to the point where Mirna was actually uncomfortable being alone with her. But surprisingly, just a few days later, despite all of her initial objections and anger for reasons unknown to anyone but Jessica, she reluctantly took Mirna's advice and dumped her boyfriend. This should have been a positive turning point for Jessica, but it wasn't. And because of this, as time went on, she began to secretly harbor a deep resentment towards Mirna for even suggesting that she end things with Patrick. After the breakup, Jessica began to drink heavily, and her attitude towards her friends and co-workers began to change. Over the next 2 years, she drank more and more until one night, while driving drunk, she plowed her car over a curb through the wall of a busy nursing home. Despite potentially killing residents of the nursing home, Jessica was not sorry at all. Instead, she was very, very angry. Her life was spiraling out of control, and over the next 2 years, she attempted to end her own life 5 separate times. Now, looking back on her past relationship with Patrick, she began to really regret breaking up with him, and so she began to send him countless text messages and voicemails, lighting up his phone constantly, and when she didn't get the response she was looking for, she began to threaten to hurt herself, hurt him, and hurt his friends if he didn't take her back. Patrick wanted nothing to do with her or her problems, so he went to the police, who issued an urgent restraining order against her. Meanwhile, back in Jakarta, Mirna was thriving and having the time of her life. She was living a lifestyle of a wealthy socialite. She had a well-paying job that she loved going to, and on top of that, she was planning her dream wedding. There was only one dark cloud that cast a shadow over her life at that time, and that was Jessica. Because of Jessica's continuing problems and their uncomfortable discussion last time they had seen one another, Mirna decided not to invite her. But in Jessica's mind, she already believed that Mirna was to blame for all of her problems ever since she took Mirna's advice and broke up with Patrick. Her downward spiral, she thought, was all Mirna's fault, and her anger and resentment escalated exponentially when she found out she was not invited to Mirna's wedding. Mirna and her husband had a beautiful island wedding in Bali without Jessica present. And just a few days after the wedding, Jessica's terrible attitude and actions resulted in her being fired from her graphic design job, and so now she was jobless and had nothing holding her in Australia. She decided it was time to go back to Jakarta to visit some old friends. She was eager to get together with Mirna to let her know there were no hard feelings, and she wanted to congratulate her on her recent wedding. So after a bit of back and forth over text, the two girls agreed to meet for coffee at 5:15 p.m. on January 16th, 2016. But Mirna was apprehensive. Despite Jessica's upbeat attitude and excitement about getting together, Mirna wasn't so sure. Mirna didn't want to go alone to meet up with Jessica based on the last time that they had seen each other, and so she asked her mutual friend Hanny to go with her. Hanny knew both Mirna and Jessica, which would ultimately make things a little less awkward for everyone. Jessica arrived at the coffee shop, where they agreed to meet at 3:30 p.m. that afternoon, which was more than 90 minutes before Mirna and Hanny were scheduled to arrive. She then wandered around the coffee shop looking at the seating arrangement, and then after a little while, she left the coffee shop to go shopping for some gifts for her friends. She purchased 3 small bottles of soap for each of them, and then returned to the restaurant at 4:14, holding 3 large gift bags that contained the soap. The bags were unusually large, considering that they only had a small bottle of soap in each of them. It was then that the security cameras captured Jessica walking around the entire coffee shop again, looking for the perfect table, occasionally glancing around and then directly at the cameras that were placed around the space, and after a few minutes of searching around the restaurant, she settled upon a half-circle booth on the side of the coffee shop with large palm trees behind it. The palm trees behind the booth conveniently blocked the security camera behind them, leaving only a single security camera across the restaurant pointing directly at the table. Once she was settled, she placed the large gift bags on the table and then just sat there for a few moments looking at the gift bags. And then, after a little while, she began to move the gift bags around a bit, sort of positioning them around more to the center of the table. She then ordered a Vietnamese iced coffee for Mirna and 2 additional coffee drinks for herself and Hanny. When the waiter delivered the drinks to the table, Jessica was seen on the security camera doing something with the drinks. But the cameras weren't able to capture exactly what she was doing because those large gift bags that she had placed on the table and positioned so carefully were blocking the view. When she was done doing what she was doing, she sat back in her chair and waited 52 minutes for Hannah and Mary to arrive at 5:16 p.m. Within a few short seconds of sitting down, Mirna thanked Jessica for the Vietnamese iced coffee, took it in her hands and proceeded to take a large mouthful of it. And as soon as Mirna swallowed, she knew something was terribly wrong. Shocked and scared, Mirna began frantically waving her hand in front of her mouth and somehow managed to tell the girls, both Jessica and Hanny, that there was something wrong with the coffee. In less than a minute after she had taken her drink, Mirna's head fell back against the seat, her eyes rolled back in her head, and her body began to convulse violently as she started foaming from the mouth. Everyone in the coffee shop started to gather around the table, unsure of what was happening or what to do. Initially, they thought Mirna was an epileptic and was having a seizure. Hanny, who was distraught, picked up her phone and called Mirna's husband. Jessica, however, didn't seem concerned at all. Mirna was unresponsive, and emergency medical workers carried her out of the coffee shop, rushing her to the hospital, but unfortunately, she died shortly after. After Mirna was taken to the hospital, back at the coffee shop, Jessica started pointing fingers at people who she thought could have been responsible for what had just happened. She accused the restaurant manager of putting something in Mirna's drink, and so because of this accusation, he decided to quickly collect the 3 cups of coffee off the table and save them in the back of the restaurant until the police arrived. It wasn't until 3 days after Mirna's death that police analyzed the contents of the Vietnamese iced coffee, and they realized Mirna didn't die of an epileptic seizure. Mirna's drink contained a lethal dose of cyanide. During the autopsy, the medical examiner found that there was bleeding in Mirna's stomach, consistent with that of corrosive substance. Traces of cyanide were found in her stomach, but not in any of her other internal organs. And when police analyzed the security camera footage from the coffee shop, Jessica was seen awkwardly backing away from the scene while Mirna was convulsing. Within weeks of Mirna's death, Indonesian police officially charged Jessica with Mirna's murder. Jessica was found guilty and sentenced to 25 years in prison. So that's going to wrap it up for this video. Thank you for watching, and if you haven't already, please make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss any of our Creepyville stories. If you have any story suggestions, please leave it in the comments below, and if you found today's secret in the background, write down the timestamp in the comments, and if you're the first one to do so, I will pin you to the top, and I will see you again later.